Hey everybody, welcome to Watches with Dennis. And I see I actually have given a little bit of a spoiler on my first watch that I was going to discuss when I shared the screen there. But today we are going to go over brands that I have never wanted. And I think it'll be sort of an interesting conversation in the sense that I did a similar topic, kind of the opposite end of the spectrum last week about brands I've never owned, but I've been interested in trying to get. And I thought, okay, well, what's the antithesis of that? And that would be watch brands that just don't do it for me for whatever reason. And in fact, the reasons vary quite a bit. There are some where it's actually a brand that I like the idea of the brand, but I just never been able to find anything to rally around in the sense of a particular model or just a singular watch that does it for me in the sense of thinking that it's worth the investment. So that's sort of going to be our topic for today. And I guess before getting started, just sort of catch up on some stuff because so what's going on in the watch world. I actually went to our area Rolex AD yesterday. I had not been since I think November or so. And it's not a boutique, so they deal in JLC, Tudor, of course, with Rolex being there. They're a Patek dealer. I think Tag Heuer, and Cartier. Those are the brands I know that they've got. So anyway, I thought I wanted to go ahead, and they'd sent me a magazine sometime earlier in the week, so it kind of reminded me. And I thought, you know what, let me go and check, because when I was last there, I asked them sort of like what was the wait time for a no date sub, which is really the only other Rolex out there that I have any interest in that I don't own, because I have an Explorer 2 from a couple generations ago. And at the time, it was about a year is what their estimate was. Well, I didn't actually like get on a list or anything. I wasn't even sure how they do it. So I went in, asked them, very non-committal in terms of time estimate, because they indicated, it's a pretty popular line. They don't, know when they're going to get them. So it just kind of works like that. And so, hello, Neff. Welcome to the live stream. I'm killing time before we actually get into the topic by recounting watch stuff that's happened recently. So I'm there with talking to one of the sales representatives. I say, okay, well, I'm interested in a no date Submariner, and they said, okay, well, I mean, we can take down your interest. And I said, well, how do you all do it? Like, how does it work here? Do you need a significant buying history? Is that how you operate? Or, I'm just like, let's just be really transparent about it. And they said, no, that they don't actually model it off of how much you've been spending with them. And this is sort of a small Kansas City-based chain of jewelers, because they have a couple other locations on the Missouri side and on the Kansas side. And so they said, well, no, the main thing is we're trying to avoid selling to anyone that's going to flip the watch. But half of it is just you being local to the area, because we represent this part of the region for Rolex, and so we want people to be nearby. We don't sell to people that are at distance. And so, hello, Sivan, if I'm saying that right, welcome to the live stream. And hey, Mike, I don't know about beauty. I'm wearing my custom Hydra pinball shirt, which is an inside joke far too difficult to explain. I designed the shirt. I didn't design the Hydra. I modified him to make him not be a copy of someone else's art. And so anyway, they're like, so where do you live? I tell them I'm in the suburbs. I'm like 8 miles away from the store. So they're like, okay, well, we'll just fill out the form. They do have the little display models. If you remember, maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago, there was some news that Rolex was going to give out like display models that don't have actual working movements in them. They had those, so you could actually try the watches on. So they let me try that on. And while I was there, I wanted to check out the burgundy dial Tudor, the Black Bay, not the Black Bay 58, the Black Bay that came out at Watches and Wonders with the burgundy bezel. It's supposed to be a lot thinner than the traditional 41 millimeter Black Bay. It's still 41 millimeter, but it's supposed to be thinner. So I was like, I want to check that out, and they didn't have it. Like they had to bring over another rep. And the other rep's like, we actually haven't gotten any of those in yet. And they're like, do you want me to put you down on that? She started to write on the little my little interested sheet on the Submariner to write down the Tudor. I'm like, no. I was just really curious about the thickness of it. I don't have any Tudors anymore. I've gotten rid of all the Tudors. So I was like, I'm not I don't want to check that one out yet. And the 50. No, I did not ask about the 54s. I thought about that. This is a full. I was going to say full size, but that's not fair because that implies that a 54 is not a full size watch, and it is. No, this was they released it at the same time with the 54s. It's the one with the aluminum bezel is red, but otherwise it's a black bay. But I think it's Meta certified, kind of like they did with one of their ceramics. So it's still it's a Tudor black bay, no number, but okay. And so Cloud says, and he's one of the channel members, which I appreciate. Thank you, Ken. Says it's the same as the ceramic. No, I have not tried the ceramic on. So I thought, well, they gotta have the new one, right? It's been a couple months. No, they don't. They didn't have it. And so I was like, okay, well, because I'm still there. It's like, even though they're only 8 miles away, there's a lot of traffic to get there. So even though I went like at 10 in the morning, so I'm like, well, while I'm here, they're JLC dealer, and I've not really been interested in the Polaris, but I thought I'd like to see how it wears because it's an interesting dive watch. So it's like, well, what about the Polaris? Can I try on the Polaris? And the other sales, or the one I wasn't talking to, is over at the computer. I hear go typing away. And she's like, all right, well, we don't have any Polaris here either. It's like, I'm almost like, well, what do you have? I mean, it's a Polaris. It's not that popular of a watch. That's probably why they don't have any. As it turns out, they're like, we have one at the Kansas City, Missouri store. We could get it over here for you. I'm like, I don't want to drive back. It's not that important. They're like, no, it's not a big deal. Really. We can have it over here this afternoon. It's not a big deal. I'm like, I'm probably not going to buy it. And they're like, no, well, just to let you try it on, you can. I'm like, don't do it. I don't want to come back. If it's not here right now, I'm not coming back. Just put me down for the sub and let's just leave it at that. So I did not get to try on anything else other than the Rolex Submariner, because those were the only 2 things I had in mind. But the other person had me look at her computer screen. She's like, here are the 3 that we can get. It's like, okay. And she's like, it's a really interesting watch. I go, I know. That's why I wanted to try it. But it's got the internal diving bezel. It's inside the bezel. And I was like, I'm not sure if I'm cool with that or not. I just thought it would be interesting to try it while I was here. But you don't have it, and I don't want to drive back later in the day. So let's just leave it at that. But thank you very much. So they're very nice. And the only thing they said other than getting on the list was email every couple of months just to continue to express interest. And when they get stuff, they claim they just go down the list and they don't base it off of any shopping. I am technically seen, I guess, as a recurring or an existing customer. I've never bought through them, but I did have one of my watches serviced through their watchmaker. So I guess that's how I ended up on their mailing list. So anyway, so that's that story. And yes, that was my logic, Ken, was that the no dates, because the date's a more popular watch, isn't it? I mean, I've assumed so, because I just in terms of like the average watch buyer, maybe not collector, but the average watch buyer wants a date. And I like date watches, but I have plenty of them. I just don't want it for the sub. And in fact, she did say she got one that day that someone else on her list that she already had from a few months ago was going to come in and get. So they are getting them in and stuff. But that's why I went back, was I thought I've been hearing multiple reports that a lot of these watches are a lot more obtainable now. Rolex purportedly has moved up from 1 million watches to 1.3 million watches per year. And a lot of those, of course, are going to be Submariners because it's a very popular watch line. But it's the one I've been interested in. I've been looking at Blancpain too, but I figured if I'm going to get that, that'll be used because it's going to be cheaper used than new for a Blancpain. Hey, Obese, welcome to the live stream. And hey, Kevin, glad you tuned in. And in terms of what am I wearing, I don't do wrist checks in the normal videos, but on the live streams, I do. This is my one vintage watch. This is a weird one. This is a Spiro Agnew watch. I have a video. No one watched it. So I'll plug it here. It's better than that sounds. No one watched it, but it's an interesting history. This was a gift, but in terms of why is there a Spiro Agnew watch? And for those, especially for those of you who aren't American, Spiro Agnew was a vice president to Richard Nixon. And he resigned in disgrace. And that's how Gerald Ford became vice president, which when Nixon resigned in disgrace, Gerald Ford became president, not Spiro Agnew. So anyway, this watch actually predates that scandal too. So it's an interesting story, but very, very, very not a watch story. It's a Spiro Agnew story. So, and he's before my time because I was born after he was out of office. But And so a parallel, I don't know what a parallel is. I don't know what that is. So it's not a word I'm familiar with. But what I am familiar with is brands that I don't like. So that's today's topic for our live stream. Last week I did a live stream talking about brands I've never owned, but I want to own. They've either there's something about the brand I like, or there's a specific watch I like, and just for various reasons I've never pulled the trigger. Money's often a common one with with those. With these, it's not an issue of money, though. I'm going to have some where they're so expensive it wouldn't be an issue anyway. It's like it'd be irrelevant if I wanted them or not. But these are watch brands that I just cannot get into. Now, some of them are brands I kind of wish I could, because they've got like a devoted following, and there's some that I'm sort of indifferent on, but it'd be fun to talk about. And those of you in the live chat, if you want to throw out brands that you don't care for, that you've never been able to really get behind, I think it'd be interesting, especially if they're kind of famous brands. I mean, there's any old micro brand, of course, that we could say, I'm not into a brick, for example. It's like, well, that's no surprise, really. But okay, so it's an old brand. Okay, I'll have to look into it. Neff bets Panerai is on the list. Well, Neff, if you were a betting man, you would probably make a lot of money. But that's not the first one we're going to talk about. You actually see from the tabs if you want spoilers on what all of them are, because I preload everything because I am a planner. So we're going to start with Jacob & Company. Now, this is a brand where money means it does not matter that I don't like the watch. But I have found these things. They're interesting. I will actually go and look at Jacob & Company watches simply because they're so over the top gaudy, at least some of them, that it's interesting what they stick in under the glass. But these things seem so wholly unwearable that I can't understand why, even if money was no object, why you would ever own one. There's some clever ideas, like, all right, so we got this casino tourbillon. Maybe the tourbillon's on the back. I don't care, because I would never own a roulette wheel as a watch. Maybe as a joke, if it was like the price of this Spiro Agnew watch or something, maybe that would be okay. But at least you could tell the time with it. So it's an attractive layout watch. I like that idea behind that. And the engineering on these is really cool. So that's another thing to be worth noting. While I have no interest in this brand, I do acknowledge they actually have some really impressive complications going on. And I see Sylvan has pointed that out as well. And some of these, like, I like the Astronomica, like as a visual look, it's an interesting look. But I don't like it as a timepiece, because they do, and Breguet does this too on some of their watches. Like when you've got this, okay, I'm making sure you can see my mouse. You see how like you get this, just like a little portion of the watch is dedicated to telling the time. That just does not work for me on watches. And so like there's a whole, now Breguet doesn't do that on all their watches. They have a line of watches that does it though. And I don't like any of them. So when you take actually, that's one of my big things with the that very popular Christopher Ward, the Bel Canto. When you do just a really small portion, and I mean, it depends. It doesn't have to be the full size. Like I like the Longa one. I like the Pano line from Glasshuta, and those aren't taking up the full dial to tell the time. But it's more than this, or at least I think it looks better than this. But the complications are very impressive. But these things are like globes. They're like globes for the wrist. I could never really imagine getting away with wearing one without it looking really stupid. So it's an interesting brand with a lot of, like the Godfather one, and it plays the theme. I don't love the Godfather theme, but you know, it's kind of this, it's interesting in that music box sort of vibe way. But like as a brand, I would never, again, the price is so high. The price is so high that it's a non-issue for me, but that's kind of where I'm at. And that's an interesting question. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if there is a prototypical Jacob & Company buyer. I mean, obviously you have to get past the money part first. So it's got to be someone where it's not a big deal to, like, no one wants, I'm assuming. I don't think there are very many people out there that like their Grail watch is a Jacob & Co. and like they'd have to really stretch to get into it. I think it's either like you've just got that sort of money and this catches your eye, because these watches are at best situational, right? You couldn't like wear them to everything. I mean, we can do what we want, we're people, but I wonder. And And so, yes, firstly, you want, for me at least, firstly, yeah, time telling is the core function, and that's of the watch is my primary desire for watches. I'm not into watches as I like really attractive watches, but the functionality of the watch is principal to me, and that's probably just because of me, how I grew up with watches, right? So having a watch was important because back in the 80s when I first got a watch, that's how I knew what time it was, and I still rely on watches to tell the time. Yes, I have a phone. I don't like pulling it out of my pocket just to look at the time. So unless I'm on my phone, I use my watch. So it's sort of like that. Um has anyone seen one out? Like, I've never met a person who, not only have I never met anyone to my knowledge, at least, that owns a Jacob and Co. I've never even seen one like for review and someone wearing it around. Not that I'm in a market where we run into watch journalists that I don't know if this readily leaves the shops or not. I don't think they do. So it's just one of those. I mean, it's very unique. It's just like it's too far. It's the phrase would be avant-garde, right? So it's too avant-garde. And those who have watched my channel for a while know I struggle with avant-garde design. I'm very boring on design. My watch tastes run pretty conservative. My most, I guess, creative aspects would probably be more on colorations and stuff. And even then, only in certain watches. Like, I'm willing to have more playful dive watches versus like a GMT. I would want to be pretty staid, and that's just my taste. So, of course, that's going to influence some of this stuff that we're going to discuss today. So, Ken says, I can't get behind any brand that's a jewelry or leather maker first and foremost, like Cartier and Hermes. I know a lot of people are like that with Cartier as well, because they admit as a company they view themselves as a jewelry company first and foremost, which, I mean, that is where they make most of their money. I happen to like their watches a lot. I have not looked at Hermes. If I'm saying that right, is it Hermes, Hermes, or Hermes? Is the H pronounced? I don't know. Anyway, you can correct me in the chat or in the comments. Neff says, definitely not a brand one saves for. They have the money. I bet they're just a fun to hang around with on the French Riviera. Oh, yes. Not the regular Riviera, though. Only the French Riviera. Speaking of the French, I'm going to use a word that starts with F. That's the only analogy I have. So let's jump to my next one, which is Frank Muller. I got into watch collecting far too recently to have been around when this brand was hot. But I have read and I have seen other YouTube videos discuss Frank Muller, and purportedly there was a time where this brand was popular. And I think they've got some interesting designs, none of which, though, I could ever really want to have around on my wrist. But it's a brand I still see people talking about. So I think it, and hey, Neff has noted there's a Frank Muller watch that he loves, Crazy Hour. And I've heard of the Crazy Hour. I don't know if we're going to see an example here on the website, but we've got these different categories. And I can tell, like, there's design thought to this. I just can't get up. Hermes. Thank you. All right. So me dropping the H is correct. All right. I normally, when I see something and I think it's French, I drop pronouncing half the letters, and I've decided that's how you say French words. And I don't know if that gets me in trouble more often than not, but I think it does okay. So, I mean, it's mostly they have this their curved case design that they go with, and I think there's a term, little Freudian slip perhaps there. I was going to say, I think there's a term for this style, but for me, it's a little coffin-esque, hence the tomb, which I don't really care for. This like Master Square is probably the one I like the most, but the problem simply is I would never consider the Frank Muller because I would rather have a Santos. So having had a Santos, this design, this curved shape reminds me very much of the Santos 100. However, I prefer the more elegant Cartier approach to the numerals. I don't like this stretched aspect to it. It's a creative decision, maybe a little avant-garde, but beyond my ability to want to wear it. That's very Richard Mille. Spoiler, that's going to be the next brand we talk about, which I don't care for. So again, it's just there was a time where this was like a big Hollywood watch. This Curve X is probably my favorite, despite not liking the case design in and of itself. But it's very unique, at least. So I wouldn't associate any other brand like this. So Neff says, I think they call their tornado cases Curvex, which, yep, it seems to be correct. Curvex is right. So that's what I think of as prototypical Frank Mueller. And I actually like the numerals on this more. It's just the case. I don't think I can get behind the case. But again, it's just one of those watch companies that I hear about a lot. I hear that they were once extremely popular. They've slipped. Granted, lots of brands slip and are still good brands. And I don't hear much about them anymore, other than some people seem to like some of the stuff they're doing now. So it's just one of those companies where it maybe once upon a time it was high up there, but there's just nothing in the catalog that draws me in. But some of those I think are relatively obtainable. At least some of the older Frank Muellers are. Well, let's go back for our third company to another unobtainable brand, extremely popular though, right? Super hype brand, Richard Mille. And this again, they've got some really impressive complications, but most of these designs that they have, the case shape and all that, I think they're really ugly. For me, they're really ugly. Maybe some of the round stuff I could kind of get behind, but here's the thing: Richard Mille does something other than, like, we've got this avant-garde stuff like this tourbillon smiley, which is an interesting idea, and the details there, the complications are there. So I don't want to be dismissive and say they make bad watches. But all right. So again, if you have Richard Mille money, I mean, you got to have Richard Mille money, right? If you're going to go and get something like this with like pineapples and stuff on, I mean, like a literal sculpt of a pineapple. It's probably made out of gold too, but and I do like pineapples, but I never really thought about wearing a pineapple. The problem I have, though, even separate from that, is the other thing about the Richard Mille design philosophy, besides the weird avant-gardeness, the case shape, which again, we kind of got that tombstone-y look. It's the skeletonization, and I don't like skeleton dials. I'm trying to think if I've ever seen a skeleton watch design I like. I've seen some that I thought were executed pretty well, but I still never have found one that I'd ever want to own. And so I really struggle with anything where you're seeing all the way in. I prefer exhibition case backs in those instances. I generally, though, skeletonized watches I think are difficult to read. I think Richard Mille, by and large, actually makes their watches pretty legible, which, unlike Jacob & Co., I think it's actually a lot easier to read these RMs. But you see, as we scroll down, this is just a skeletonized smorgasbord of watch faces, and I don't like them. I just don't. So it's a brand that's probably for a lot of people, it might be I don't know if I'd use the term grail, but it is like, if you're into hype, like if you're into hype watches, I could definitely see Richard Mille like being at if you're just driven by like what you see on Instagram culture and stuff. It's kind of the pinnacle in a lot of ways, right? Because it's so unobtainable versus Rolex or even a Nautilus. You can get cheaper than some of these RMs go for. And they've got incredible tech, like, a watch where, what was it with, they've got with, what's his name? I think he's a Spanish tennis player, Rafael Nadir. Is that his name? It's been a while since I played tennis. I don't watch tennis. I played a tennis video game once, though, and he was a character in it. And so, a watch that you can play. I mean, most mechanical watches are like, do not play tennis in this, because of all the force that your swings are going to do, and what that's going to do to the movement. And Richard Mille, engineers a watch where it's like, go ahead and play whatever sports you want with this watch on. That's pretty impressive for a mechanical watch. So again, there's some really cool tech there, but they're so ugly. I've never found one at all that I thought was remotely worth owning, if I even had crazy Richard Mille money, which I don't. So the problem solves itself for me anyway. See, Sylvain says, I have one Baudry titanium skeleton, and it's okay as telling the time. I've seen a few others that have decent, like, when I've looked at them, even in the renders, it looks like the legibility's there. Cartier has a few, for example. They do skeletonization, I think, pretty well. I still just don't like it very much, though. Makes it, is this, even when I can read the time, there's something about it that I don't know if it's because the movement distracts me or what, but it just, I can't click to it. Mike says it's okay that I'm wrong, which is good. I'm glad that it is okay. I might be very wrong. I mean, that's part of the point. Nev says the average Richard Mille owner is not the person I want to hang out with on the French Riviera. Well, the French Riviera, is a very particular place where you only want a particular sort for hanging out with, or even just randomly encountering. Watch snobs is Steve on, right? I think that's about when I was talking about the hype and such. I don't know if I don't think everyone who wants a Richard Mille would fall into the category of like pure on snobbery. Because there's the tech there. I could see someone truly admiring the watch and like wanting the watch for those reasons. I could also see it as a sense of like, there are watch buyers, and this happens in even on much lower price points, right? Than Rolex is a good case in point, where if you're really concerned about getting into a hobby and you just like you're thinking, what if I get out of this hobby? Am I going to get smoked on the resale and I'm just going to lose a whole bunch of value? Watch brands that are hype brands are safe, right? They're safer. So you can people buying Rolexes aren't, especially if they're getting them retail, aren't overly concerned that they're going to lose a bunch of money. Even it goes back to the old days and they shed a couple thousand. That's better than shedding 40 to 50%, right? Like you might expect to see out of a Blancpain. So I could see people maybe wanting who are high dollar people, and they're like, I don't know if this weird, grand complication Patek is really going to actually hold its value, but an RM might because of the snobs. So there could be that as well. Mike has said I was wrong. Nadal is how it's pronounced. So thank you. So Nadal. But I'm pretty sure he is the one with one of the RM collabs. They do a lot of collabs with race car people too. So again, and some people might want that because some of their quote unquote heroes wear the watch, right? It's like, why do I still have interest in a Rolex Submariner? Generally speaking, I try and mentally, I like what I like, so it's got to be that. But I like to like things. I like to find things that I end up liking that aren't like what's in the stereotypical watch box, right? So there's part of my personality that's like that. But I still remember seeing the Submariner on James Bond's wrists in the Connery films, and I thought it was a cool watch, and that's like imprinted. And so I love one of the most popular watches in the world for that reason. And it's just, maybe if I hadn't seen it when I was a kid, I'd feel differently, but that's what happened. So that's how it goes. So back on the subject of skeletonization. Oh, look, your comment's so detailed. I have to squish way up high to be above it. Skeletonized look is not something I've been crazy about either, but the new JLC Reverso Duo Face has a super cool skeletonized chrono. And if you don't like it, well, you always have the other side. That is a good point. And that is those new, actually, I like a lot of the new JLCs that dropped this year, but the chronographs do look pretty good. And Ken says, I can't get behind any brand that's a watch 80 first, as they always try to peddle their brands for you to get you what you really want. For example, Bucherer and Vampe, and even Watchbox with De Bethune. That's true. They did buy De Bethune. And so whenever I hear Tim Masso, who I like his streams a lot, but I kind of tune out a little bit when I start hearing the De Bethune thing, because I'm like, But plus, De Bethune has a lot of skeletonized watches, so it's kind of easy for me to steer clear. Vempe is an interesting one. We don't talk Vempe much on this channel. They're interesting to me because they're one of the 5 original names associated with the Fliegers. So, and they still do make a Flieger. They don't make very many. That's not like Laco and Stova. Like if you want a Flieger, look Laco and Stova. If you need a lot of variety, whereas like IWC, they have decent variety, but you're starting at $4,000 with IWC. Vempe's kind of at that IWC price point, but I don't think they do very many Fliegers. So I've only ever looked at Vempe because of that. But yeah, I was surprised because I watched a video about the history of the Flieger. Then I loaded up and started to do research on the existing Fliegers. And then I saw Vempe. I go there and I'm like, wait a moment, this is a dealer. What is that? And then I realized, oh no, they have a line of watches too, but they're a dealer. It's to me, I have to agree with Ken. To me, I find it very, I don't know, not so much that I can't get behind the brand, rather as I find it a really weird relationship to put yourself in, so to speak. I've never looked at I've seen a few Bucherers. I've never gone out and explicitly looked at them. There was I think there was a Bucherer bronze version of the Tudor that I really liked because it was a blue dial, and I'm not normally a blue dial guy, but that one looked really nice. But the price delta between it and a regular bronze with like a black gilt dial or the tropical brown was not worth it. In my opinion, was not worth it. So Savant says, for me, it was the Seiko 1000 that belonged to my oldest bro in the 80s. It's just those sort of snapshots. I know a lot of people are this way about the Casio watches, the calculator ones today. They're like, I want a calculator watch. It's like, because either they had one as a kid or they didn't. It's like, were you the kid that got to have the transformer, or were you the kid who got stuck with the GoBots? If you were me, you kind of got both. So it just depended what holiday it was. So anyway, so that's Richard Mille. So we're halfway through the list. So let's jump to brand number 4, MB&F. Now this is one I kind of want to like, and so the first ones I mentioned, Jacob & Co., Frank Mueller, and Richard Mille. It's like I'm not into them, and I don't care, but they're well-known brands, so I wanted to talk about them. These next 3 are brands that are well-known, and I kind of wish I was into them, and I'm kind of annoyed that I'm not. And I shouldn't be, because there's plenty of other watches to choose from. But hey, we got to have some content for entertainment here anyway. So again, when I think of impressive engineering, MB&F to me is Jacob & Co., but a little more on the engine. I like them a little better. Like their avant-garde is more avant-garde. It's not just like sticking the Monopoly guy and the Godfather theme into a watch. I mean, look at this, like this, whatever this is. I don't even know what to call this thing. They number them, right? Horological machine number 9. This is like a firm run by engineers. You can tell by the name of it. But all right, so this thing, whatever this thing is, we're going to call it the thing. Not John Carpenter's the thing. That would be scary. But the thing. This thing is both ugly and impressive, right? It's so weird. All right, so they modeled on a jet engine. Okay, so I don't really know anything about jet engines. To me, it kind of looks like a little rocket ship. From this perspective, I could never really fathom like wearing this on my wrist, but I could, like, if it was a clock for my desk, it'd be a totally different story. And they actually do clocks too. They have it was on the homepage, and I've looked at their clock before. I thought it was on their homepage. Oh wait, I have to go back to. I have to click the back button twice. So they have some other like creation stuff that they've done. That's like desk stuff, just like, well, so like I like this stuff, but that's not the watches. And by the way, this stuff's expensive too. They're really expensive. So it's like I don't know. There's this weird. It's weird. It's a weird company. Again, kind of like with Jacob & Co. and Richard Mille for that matter. A lot of their watches are way too avant-garde. They're way too big, like the dome. Like I'm not into super domed sapphire stuff. All of it's expensive, so I guess I'm not into it because I couldn't afford it anyway. So maybe don't even bother looking. But versus like Jacob, because I still got the Jacob & Co. things here. These Jacob watches seem a lot less legible than this stuff from MB&F. Like MB&F looks a lot more. I hesitate to use the word practical, but it seems more practical. It seems more impressive engineering wise. They're numbering their watches. They've gone full on nerd engineer. I like so much about what they want to do, but what they want to do isn't like aesthetically what I want. So that's one of the brands where it's like their brand is so cool and it's so not for me. Except maybe one of them desk toys. Someone sell me a desk toy like 80% off. I don't even know if I could afford 80%. I don't remember the prices, but someone find one as something cool on the, like you see some people like, what is it? Is it Random Rob? I think his channel, he's got like the little robots that hold like his G-Shocks and stuff. Like I want like an MB&F toy like that. I want a desk toy. My desk has got like, I got like a Bic pin on this desk and a thing of chapstick. Like I need a fun toy. I don't have any toys on this. I have a stapler. That's like a very office space thing, but it's not a cool stapler. It's a regular. I don't know why I'm showing you my stapler, but that's what we're doing right now. So let's see. Ken says, nope, collabs don't count. You have to buy the Bucherer brand. All right, that's a fair point. Koji says, MB&F are cool as watch/art pieces and are neat to see in person for sure. And I do agree. That's where it's like, I want to like it more than I do. Ken agrees about MB&F. They don't seem like watches. No, that's super avant-garde. So avant-garde and I'm glad they've embraced doing stuff that isn't just for the wrist. Neff says MBNF sometimes does things to make me want to call it horology wasted. Ken says, for some reason, I'm into Urwerk, though. I've looked a little bit at Urwerk. And Sivan says, Robo stands. Okay, I didn't know the name. I've never asked Rob or anyone. So, okay, so Robo stands are what those are called. I don't know who makes those or how much. I'm assuming they're not too expensive because I've seen a number of people with them who do all sorts of price points on watches. So I've assumed they're probably really approachable. The thing is, my stuff are in boring, but much like me, they're boring, right? So I put them in boring boxes by and large. I have a watch winder that holds 2 watches, that has a couple watches, and everything else is just in a regular case. So it's kind of how I do it. I think it was Neff who called this way back at the start. So we got to talk Panerai, right? That's a recurring theme with me when we bring up watches. When I have guests on and we do live streams and we talk about the latest hits and stuff, I usually have guests who love what Panerai is doing, and I just don't like anything from Panerai. And it's just the case shape. That's all it is. The brand has some really cool tech in it. I know they've had some controversies, of course. Movements that used to be decorated being basically downgraded, movements that they call in-house that were basically not in-house, a lot of this is more historic. And, let me go. Sivan just points out, those are the Robo stands are not Rob's. There are watch stands that look better than what he's got. Okay. And Neff says, if I recall, they're more expensive than you expect, like 150. Okay, that is more than I thought, Neff, but that's not this is where being in the watch hobby is bad, right? So it's not as bad as it's not bad. I come from a world where I didn't know initially when I first looked at watch winders, mine was a gift, but that the first ones I all saw were over $1,000. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me for something that spins. And I, in my pinball hobby, we're at the point where there are still mods that are like $100 to $200, and then toppers that used to be free with the game are $1,000 to $2,000. It's just everyone's losing the plot. It's so strange. So now I think Panerai is probably more wearable than I instinctively think it is, because I don't think the lug to lug is necessarily that bad, even though the width is quite substantive. And some of these I like more than others. The crown guard, the classic crown guard look here, I've never liked it. And I get it. It's iconic and it's quirky. And when you see one from across the room, you're looking at a Panerai, right? All right, granted, maybe if you're way across the room, you might accidentally see an Omega Plo Prof and make that mistake. But by and large, you'll probably be right. So, but just their cushion shape, I like cushion case watches. I've owned several. I have a Seiko Turtle, but I like that style. I don't like the Panerai look. Its DNA is very, very Panerai. The problem I have with Panerai, I get there's like the Paneristas, and like it's got huge fans and it's got the history. There's so much to respect and like about the brand. The problem is, for me, it's kind of like they're in the same boat AP is, right? Audemars Piguet. So because they do so much in the Royal Oak line, it's like, are they the Royal Oak company? Yeah. Well, Panerai is like, well, we are known for one watch, the Panerai. So all we do are the iterations on the Panerai. The difference is Audemars Piguet didn't get its name known initially for doing Royal Oaks. And they clearly, with their code, 5711, successful or not, they're trying to not just be a bunch of Royal Oaks. This is just random Dennis's advice no one asked for. I think Panerai needs to try and do a watch line that doesn't look like the Panerai. Do something different, diversification. I just think they're too all in on this shape. And maybe that's enough to stay in business. I don't know, but their price point, loading this back up again, I get it. Some of these are gold and stuff, but these price points, these are not inexpensive watches, right? This is like starting around like mid-tier luxury when you're near $10,000 starting on some of this stuff. So I imagine they've got some that are actually far more approachable that weren't there on that load screen. But I've looked at a number of when the announcements come out, I check out Panerai because it's a well-known brand. And their price points are kind of like, they're moving up market on that pricing. And I'm not sure what you get is worth it. But of course, I just can't get into the shape of the watch. So that's kind of the boat I end up in. See, Koji's agreeing with Neff's statement, which was, I like Panerai, I just have a small wrist. They've done some really stupid things and the market is flooded with fakes, so I just admire them from a distance. Yeah, that's another That's a good point. I would really struggle. I normally like buying watches used because you save a lot of money, and I'm all about saving money. I mean, like the reason why I'm willing to go to an AD for something like a Rolex is because you don't really save money anymore on the used market. The two I've owned, all my Rolexes up till this point have always been used. But yeah, I would be a little afraid on Panerai, especially because Panerai's own social media team, and I get it, they're not watchmakers, most likely running the social media, but share fakes. And it's like, that's really concerning when you share a fan's photo and it's a fake. And other people are calling you, like, people are able to tell from that photo that it's not real. That's scary. That it's happened more than once. That's almost a running joke. I think that's pretty concerning. Neff notes, I think you can make a nice dress watch with some of these Panerai dials. There are the dials have some interesting stuff going on. There really is a lot that's close there. I'm not a huge sandwich dial fan in and of like as a default. I kind of like some of what they do with the sandwich more than some of, say, the Omega 300 sandwiches, which, like, for those, like the vintage Omega 300 style versus the 300M is often a sandwich dial. I kind of like the balance is there. There's stuff there. It's quirky in a way that I actually like in a lot of instances, but just not with that case shape. I just can't do it. Thinking of the last one, which I could do the case shape on. This is a brand which gets promoted so much, especially for people wanting to get into luxury watches, because they've got some good entry level price point pieces, and that's Nomos, or more specifically Nomos Glashütte. Here, I like the case shapes just fine. It's the dials. I cannot do these dials. I have looked at so many Nomos watches over the years, especially when I was first getting into collecting, and I was trying to stay, like, I was willing to explore luxury watches, but I wanted more entry level price points. You know, things like between the $1,000 and $3,500. And so I'd look at Nomos because it comes up a lot, and I have not found a dial that I am willing to own from them. Now, I should say I like the round case shapes. The Terra watch line doesn't appeal to me. This is like the Monaco. Like, the Monaco's a cool watch, and it's not for me. It's too, like, I can do Santos square. I can do rectangles that are like tanks and reversos. This sort of square is too square. It's too sharp, I think is what it is. The edging is too sharp. I want it rounded. So, but these other watches, the Tangente, the Club watch in particular, those are the two I always hear about, and I just cannot get behind these dials. And I think, as I've looked at so many of them, what it fundamentally comes down to is Nomos has very much embraced that Bauhaus aesthetic. And apparently with watches, I just don't like Bauhaus, is what it must come down to. Now, Bauhaus inspired, Bauhaus-esque, I can get behind. You know, the Calatrava, for all intents and purposes, appears to at least be somewhat inspired by a Bauhaus dial, but it's not like this. Not like when you think of like the school of Bauhaus, this pure, like, I could almost do this as like Bauhaus as a clock, but not as a watch. I just don't like it. And so many of their dials are basically the same, probably because they've got their in-house movement. So we're gonna have our 6 o'clock position, small seconds, and we're gonna have our same style hands on all the watches. And the thing we're gonna change up is, okay, these are gonna have stick indices. Okay, these are gonna have Roman numerals. These are going to have a California dial. When I'm not looking at the right one, here's the California dial. I don't like California dials as a default anyway, so that one's out no matter what. And that's what it comes down to for me. But I like the brand and the movements, and the movement finishing and what you get at the price point. I think it's real. There's a lot of watch there for the money. I think it's a really good brand for people who are into the luxury space and want to explore a watch. And there's just a lot. I think there's a lot to love about Nomos, and it leaves me cold every single time. And I keep checking them out. I think this must be a closed case back watch. I was going to show you an example of one that was a little cooler, I guess. I need to look at one of the expensive watches. Is it the Orion? Is it pricey? I don't remember anymore because I never shop for them. No, they're cheap. Cheap for a luxury watch. There we go. We're getting up into $3,600. This should be display case back. So yeah. So anyway, that's the barrier I run into. But I mean, look at there we go. See, like at this price point, $3,600. I mean, think about the display case back you get on Tudor. Tudor's movement is so Spartan that I think I'm amazed that the brand isn't embarrassed that they show off that movement. I love Tudor's movement, in-house movement. It's an impressive movement. I love how it winds. I love the power reserve, but it is not a looker. I think they do better movement finishing than you get on Omegas. And Omegas trade at a higher price point. So like, but I don't buy watches to look at the movement, right? So I mean, that's an added bonus. I just can't get past these dials. I just can't do it. So that's my last one I have there. Let's see. We've got Prost. Welcome to the live stream. I think that's your first comment today. Saying not for him either. As I think that was as of us moving to the Nomos discussion. Koji says, first watch that got me down the dark horological path was the Nomos Orion. I still very much admire their dials and movements if you're into Bauhaus, obviously. And yeah, that's fundamentally it. I've realized I looked at, was it Young House as well? A lot more approachable on a lot of price points versus Nomos, incidentally. If you're into Bauhaus, definitely check out Young House. Same issue, leads me cold. And I've looked at enough of them. I like the principle and understanding what Bauhaus did. Like, I get it, but as watches, they leave me cold. So it's just a design thing, but just for me, it's just too bad on Nomos because I like the brand. Like Young House, I could take or leave. If they just want to do Bauhaus, I don't care. Nomos, I kind of wish would do more than it because I think they got so much going on. They just need to move, just punch on through that ceiling, get past Bauhaus, and they'll expand their audience so much. I know I'm not alone. I've seen it on Reddit that people are like, I just can't do the Nomos dials. And they're like me. They're just, Bauhaus just doesn't work for us on wristwatches. But obviously, it's gotten a lot of attention. So it works for a lot of you all. It's just something that, just one of those things about me and the way my brain works. Prost says, Tank is a sharp-looking watch. Cartier owns that look. I do like the Tank a lot. I actually prefer the Reverso when it comes to rectangular watches. That being said, when you say Tank, you get a lot. I mean, because we got the regular, like traditional Tank. You got the Tank Amari Khan, which is much longer and thinner in a way. And then you've got the Tank from Francaise, which kind of feels like it kind of is a morph between a Tank and a Santos to me. And then you've got the, there's another one, right? There's something based off of I don't remember, Tank Angolese or something, which I don't remember what that one looks like, quite frankly. I usually look at the more traditional Tank styles. Yeah, but it's very iconic. And the ultimately the reason why I went Reverso was the numerals. So I, generally speaking, favor Arabic numerals over Roman. And I had Arabic options with the Reverso, and I didn't with the Tanks. So, but that being said, Cartier does a really clean Roman numeral. In fact, maybe the best of any of them, which is why I had a Santos for a while. So that let me get to enjoy that. So Neff says there are some clubs with cool color dials that kind of push them over the Bauhaus barrier for me, at least, but most of them are too austere. Yeah, no, they are doing some experimentation. In fact, if I load back up their model families, they've got, is it the Metro? They're doing a little bit more fun with like this, it's getting, you see, it's still Bauhaus inspired. But this is kind of a fun, like I see a watch like this and I think this is probably a line that maybe is trying to target, like when they came up with, never mind. In rose gold, I don't think you're necessarily targeting like someone who's maybe graduating college or something. But like I see this kind of fun, it's kind of quirky, it's modern. Like I feel like you see the Bauhaus elements, but it looks like a modern idea behind the watch. Also, by the way, I love this reminds me of Oris, like this Neomatic, and the way they do they didn't do a pointer date, they did a date disc wheel, but it's on the edge like a pointer date. And I don't know why the logo, I don't know why is my internet so slow, guys? Is it because I'm streaming? Why is it taking forever to load this up? I like this a lot. Like as I click it away, I love how they do the date with this disc. That is so cool. The rest of the dial just leaves me so cold that I just couldn't. I actually looked at this watch several times when it came out. So I was like, but I can't buy a watch just because I like the date. I'm like, I don't have that kind of just for the date only watch money. I don't operate in that space. But they do some, again, this is why I like the brand, but The title of this video is Watch Brands I've Never Wanted. I almost should rename it, because it's like, I want to want the brand. I just can't. There's always something. Every watch they have has something that makes me go, I can't do it. So it's interesting though, to find a, I think it says a lot about there being so much choice in watches that we can go through this hobby and I can find companies that I want to want, but I can't find anything in them that I want. And of course we find other companies where it's like they can't lose, right? Everything they come. I mean, look at the number of people that collect, and you see their collection, and this includes some people on YouTube, and all it is boxes of Seiko, because like the brand, granted, Seiko does a lot of watches, so you can find a lot in just Seiko that you might just love. I'm wondering, I don't know if I've ever met anyone. There's got to be somewhere, because there's someone for every, like there's a person for every watch, right? And there's probably a watch that's style that's never for anyone. And I kind of covered some of mine today, but I'm wondering if there's anyone that actually like has seen or thinks they've seen like all of I'll use it loosely because they're always making new watches, all of Seiko's catalog, and like hates all of it, like hates Seiko. Is there someone that just hates everything Seiko does, from not like as a company? Like there are lots of people that hate all the limited editions and all the SKUs and all of that. But is there someone that's like, I've looked at their turtles, their monsters, their SKXs, and I don't like any model line they have. They all are unattractive. I've never met anyone like that, but I'm kind of wondering if there is, or if Seiko's actually too big with too many diverse lines for that to be possible. But I do wonder. Well, Pross thinks the Reverso Dual Time is a killer watch. It is. I love those duo face style watches. I have a mono face because I did not want to pay thousands more for a duo. But I look at the duos every year, and I always think, you know what, I should have done. I should have sprung for it. When I bought my Reverso at the time, it was the most I ever paid for a watch. In fact, it was my record-setting watch for a really long time, until I'm trying to think if my Glashütte Panomatic Lunar was more money or not. I think it was. So I broke it. I broke it like November of last year was when I finally passed my Reverso's price. But I love the Reverso. It's one of 2 dress watches I own. Neff says, that's Omega for me, or Longines. Always something. Yeah. It's I do have an Omega. I've never owned a Longines. That is a brand that I've come close to on a few of their watches. For them, it's mostly been because, they're at a higher tier price-wise than Tissot, for example. I look at them and I'm kind of like, Longines is in that weird space where it's like, would I rather just pay a little more, 1,000 more and get something else, or spend 1,000 less and get something else? And that's kind of what happens. No, Longines is in no man's land for me. Omega I like a lot. And I do have a 300M. The problem I've found with Omegas, just generally speaking, is because of the coaxial thing, that the movement they use, they're so thick. They're so thick now. And I was willing to accept it with the 300M because it's a dive watch, and there are certain compromises I make mentally with dive watches because they are dive watches. But it's a thick watch compared to other watches with the same depth rating. I just find it a little obscene's probably a strong word, but I really think it would behoove Omega to actually try and thin their watches up, like maybe make that as a goal on the next model lines that they release, because I feel like they kind of just didn't care, and they just wanted to push their whole 3.5 hertz coaxial technology. And I'm not even sure if I'm not even sure if the movements are worth it. Like, I guess it's supposed to be less maintenance, but is it really? I mean, when you've got a service interval on a Rolex of 10 years, on Oris, modern Oris, in-house movements of 10 years, and they're not doing the coaxial thing, does it really help? Does it help enough for any of us as buyers to care? I don't know. Interesting theory, of course. Pross says, I purchased a Seiko King Turtle a year ago and added it to the collection. Yeah, I have one of the, I almost wore it today if I hadn't worn my vintage Dirty Time Company Spiro Agnew watch. But yeah, my one Seiko, and I've only ever owned this one Seiko, is a turtle. I guess it would be classified as a King Turtle because it's got the sapphire crystals. It's one of the U.S. Save the Ocean ones with the sea turtle on the back. I don't remember what else to call it other than U.S. Special Edition Save the Ocean series. It's the one with the sea green blue dial. It's the one I got. So I like it. I don't like the bracelet, but that one came also with the rubber strap. Oh, that rubber strap is really cool. That watch is, I'm not gonna say it's gonna be permanently on the rubber strap, but I put it right back. It was the first watch I put back on the rubber strap when it started to warm up again. So yeah, I like that watch a lot. I having owned it, I understand why people get like um when I first saw like 100% Seiko collections, it really confused me as a watch collector. Being, relatively, I really only started collecting in 2020. But I still mentally, I get it, but I don't. Like as a collector, I would never want to own all of one brand. It feels way too limiting. I actually prefer brand diversity. I don't own more than two of any brand. I never have at the same time. But having worn it, I see where people can fall in love with Seiko. So then from that logic, I could understand being like, you know what? I love this one. So why don't I get that one? Oh, look, I love the monster. Let's get a samurai. And then the next thing you know, you have 30 Seikos. Because it's easier also when you can find so many under $1,000, it's not as nearly like, if it's a miss, is it really that bad? Like, did it hurt you that much? Whereas if you were guessing on a Tudor and it's like, well, I'm out $2,500 to $4,000, and you might. That being said, it's relatively easy to sell. Actually, it's probably easy to sell both because Seiko is such a well-known brand. But Sivan says that's awesome. So did I. A King Samurai. He's referencing Proust getting the King Toidle. And he also says, I also have an S&P 300M black dial. My buddies who collect find that watch repulsive because of the bracelet. I love it though. Okay. I like the bracelet. Mine is the silver dial. It's one of the post 2018 release ones. But I got the one with the silver dial with the blue hands. I do wish the bracelet tapered because that is a chonker. It is a chonker bracelet, but that whole watch is thick. So it's kind of like, you know what? It works for the watch, but that would be my other recommendation. Omega, I know you're listening, and everything I say is just brilliant guidance, but taper the bracelet while you're shrinking that down. Everyone else is tapering their bracelets now for a reason. They wear better for more people tapered because it's just a little blocky otherwise, and certain wrist shapes aren't going to do that well with it. However, I've tried my 300M on a third-party silicone, and I've had it on NATO. It's back on the bracelet now. So I think the bracelet's fine for me. For my wrist shape, it works. But it is a little. That's kind. It's a chonker. It's a chonker compared to most bracelets. But I still prefer that bracelet over Seiko's bracelet or Orient's bracelet or a lot of lower end bracelets. It's just compared to a Rolex bracelet. And I had a last gen Rolex bracelet on an OP I used to own, which was my favorite wearing watch. It was a 34 millimeter though, and I kind of wished I'd gotten a 36. But the bracelet was great. But even my now 2-gen old Explorer 2 bracelet is that was when they finally gone to solid end links, but it's better. It's better than the Omega bracelet. So, and that's before Rolex really stepped up their bracelet game, in my opinion. But yeah, that being said, like I had a Grand Seiko with a bracelet. Oh my gosh, the Omega was way better. That Grand Seiko got to figure it out. They got to figure out the bracelet game because it ain't working for me. But granted, that was an older model. It was after they split off from Seiko, and so they were just having the Grand Seiko branding on the dial, but it was one of the first editions of that. So I don't know. The bracelets might be better at this point. I haven't handled a recent Grand Seiko. I haven't found one I want to get back into the brand with. Neff says the S&P 300 is like a 42 millimeter collection of all watch features I dislike wrapped into one. I love that description. That's very graphic. You have painted a picture with your words. Who needs a picture or 1,000 words when you have Neff's one line to just sort of portray everything? Of course, it's easy to think of the S&P 300 and then just be like envision it and then just see it all with like a pukey emoji face over it. That would be a very good thumbnail if I ever wanted to trash the watch. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and end the live stream. We've gone about an hour, which I think is plenty for a Saturday. I want to order lunch, so that's really the excuse why. Thanks everyone who was able to tune in live. I do appreciate the interaction with chat because otherwise I'm just talking to myself, which always feels a little weird to me, but you try and make it work. And those of you who are watching the recording, comment below on brands you don't like and a reason why. If you don't want to type that much, you can always just say if you agree or disagree with any of my particular picks, or maybe there's something there I'm not seeing. Obviously, some of these brands like Nomos and Panerai have their fans, so I know there's people see something in them that I just don't. But Otherwise, I do see a final question here from Prost asking, what do you think of the Tudor Pelagos? I picked up in December and it feels like a feather on the wrist. I have actually not handled one. Every time I've gone into the dealer and I've had them pull out Tudors for me, they've been black bays. I owned a black bay. It was a bronze, the 43 millimeter, which was a chonker of a watch, but I really liked how it wore, other than it didn't come with a bracelet. I think I would really enjoy the Pelagos because I like the dial design. I do have a titanium watch. It's an Oris Pro Pilot X, and I love it on titanium. So I would think if I wanted to go into the titanium realm for a dive watch, Pelagos would be where I was looking, but I've not handled it. So, but the lightness of the Pro Pilot is wonderful. I wondered if I would be repulsed by a light watch because, is there that assumption, there's that, and I thought I wasn't in that boat. I wasn't sure though. Like, do I associate quality with heft? I don't think I wasn't too worried about it because when I got my Explorer 2, my watch before that was from the 90s. It was a quartz Citizen chronograph. So the Rolex was lighter. And so, and I got that watch 15 years ago. So I didn't associate the same, like I learned about weight not being the same as quality at that point, though that was a nice Citizen, to be fair. So anyway, I loved it. I loved the light watch. It's great to wear. I thought about putting it on today, in fact, but I had recently worn it last week. So I decided this needed to be rewound. And this uses a pin lever escapement, this vintage watch. So I like to try and keep it running because it's a finicky movement. These movements were not really, I had it serviced from a watch maker. Cost more than the value of the watch, quite frankly. But it's, these movements were not designed for long-term servicing. These is like what pin lever is what Timex used to use, for those that are curious. But anyway, thanks for the question. Thanks to all of you who are able to tune in, and have a great weekend. Take care, everybody.